What is up, everybody? Welcome into Hoops 360 as the 2025 WNBA season comes to an end. One of the craziest and most remarkable season turnarounds that we have seen in recent history in the WNBA. The Las Vegas Aces are your 2025 WNBA champions after a sweep over the Phoenix Mercury. We will get into all of that. What were our takeaways from that championship series? Plus, now what? This offseason might be one of the most pivotal, if not the most pivotal in the history of this league. Plus, we'll focus on what teams need to look into as they rebuild this offseason. And of course, coaching changes where we think certain coaches might fit in some of these coaching vacancies. So let's get into it. I am Caroline Fenton. She's Cassandra Negley. That is Ice Young. Cass, welcome home. You've been on the road for the last 17 years. So you are finally home, fresh off of a trip to Phoenix. You saw the confetti fall. The Las Vegas Aces are WNBA champions. Now A'ja Wilson is a reporter, I guess. She's conquered everything that you can in the game of basketball. Now she's been joining some reporter scrums and post-game press conferences. Cass, you were there. The vibes, the feel, the takeaways. Tell me everything. Tell us everything about your experience covering this finals.
The bigger takeaway for A'ja Wilson was the tambourine, I think. Amen.
Yes. What can't she do?
This felt pretty done with. I will tell you, as a reporter, there are certain stories you write ahead and have ready and waiting for a champion. For example, I wrote about the Aces dynasty. Because it was a quick 4 games, a lot of us were hurrying, thinking this was going to be done, and it was. I think the biggest fight that we saw from Phoenix was after Nate Tibbetts' ejection, which we're going to get into later. But Kahleah Copper stepped up once again, seemed like they were reinvigorated. But even then, this Aces team got it done. Third championship I have seen the Aces win in person. It always follows a pretty repeatable path once they've done it. Very wide-ranging emotions, a lot of love for each other, a lot of chaos in a press conference room. This year it was a tambourine. A couple of years ago it was a boombox. But for the Aces, I think the biggest takeaway is, Caroline, we made their social media video.
We did. We are bulletin board material
haters.
Producers. We are haters.
And usually that honestly bugs me when teams do it, because I think it kind of crosses a line of there's always tension and nastiness about it. But for the Aces this year, and we heard this all the way through the finals, they were not a good team at that time when we recorded that podcast and when everyone wrote these takeout pieces about maybe the dynasty is over. Maybe they can't, come up with anything to solve it. They did come up with things to solve it. Players, Becky Hammon, the front office were all very honest about this and how they went about becoming a good team. And I think that's the lasting takeaway of this championship, is how different it looked to all the other ones and how hard they had to work for it, honestly.
And then it's the beauty in sweeping someone. I mean, on one side, again, and I had said this, guys, I've been at each game and I've been sitting at a bar. I get everyone to watch the WNBA rather than baseball, rather than NBA preseason. Hey, let's lock in here. And I'm telling stories. And they're like, oh, are they going to sweep them? And I'm like, God, I hope not, because this is not great for the league. It's the first time in which we have best of 7. And it went to 4 games. But I maybe take that back, because I also will say that this dynasty solidifying the championship in this way, to me, is the beauty in sports, is why we love dynasties. And so to me, it was they raised to a level of excellence that we hadn't seen in quite some time in this league. And so it was nice to witness all the storylines, all the personalities on that team, and really a team of vets now. You look at Jackie Young and Chelsea Gray and A'ja Wilson, and you say Joel Lloyd as well. And you guys are vets. You guys are veterans at this point, still continuing to play a high level of basketball and get better. I was probably the happiest really for a Chelsea Gray, a player who has won championships with 2 different franchises, has gotten to play with some of the best ever in the game, Candace Parker, and now A'ja Wilson. So seeing her get her 4th ring in this league was honestly pretty amazing to me. And her longevity in this sport, I've been following Chelsea Gray since she was at Duke. I just love the storylines that are around her. I will say my heart broke a little bit for Alyssa Thomas and for Dewana Bonner and Kalia Copper. Again, just as competitors, not winning a game and getting to the finals is tough, especially in the new format. It makes, though, for a very exciting season to come next year, because often we say on this pod that after you experience heartbreak is when you really start to get and you really start to be able to break through. And so I'm wondering if we'll see a revamped Phoenix Mercury team with a healthy Satu Sabli coming back. And so I'm keeping my eye on them even for next year. I know we just finished, but I'm already thinking about next year. I'm sorry, but it's just how I am. I missed the W already. Lastly, guys, Asia and Bam are so cute. Okay, I'm done.
They are so cute. And all of the photos that were circulating, and every time the camera would pan to Bam sitting with Asia's parents in game 4, like, sweet Bam, I know his legs were cramping up trying to fit in those teeny tiny seats. They are so cute. But I do want to go back to what you said, Ice, about the sweep, because traditionally, normally, I do think sweeps are bad for sports, period. Not just the W, any sport. I think sweeps can be boring, because sometimes I feel like we as sports fans have a tendency to think that greatness is boring. The reason why I think that this was unique was because it was so unlike what the Aces have done all season long. Like, Cass, we were literally bulletin board material for the Aces. They were probably playing our voices in the locker room, because we were calling the Aces like not a good team, because that's what they were. They were not a very good team. They were 500 midway through the season? Like, the Aces, they didn't look like themselves. And then they powered back late in the season, went on that 17-game win streak. And then even in the postseason, they played it close with Seattle in the first round. They went to 5 games with a banged-up Indiana Fever team. Went to overtime in Game 5 with the Fever in the second round of the playoffs. And then they turned around on short rest when the Phoenix Mercury had rest. They did have their legs underneath them, turned around and swept them. That's why I think it's different, because it wasn't just, this team that's just dominating everybody all season long, who just kicked their feet up in the postseason and had an easy path to a championship. That wasn't the story of this Aces team. And I think that adds such a fascinating chapter into the book of this Aces dynasty, Cass, is they did it differently. And Becky Hammon was so emotional in the postgame, talking about how hard it was. I think that's what brings beauty to the sweep, is because I don't think we saw this coming. I mean, 3 of us picked the Aces to win. Thank you very much. But we picked them in 6 and 7. We weren't picking a sweep.
No,
not at all. It was so different. If you look at this on paper, wow, the Aces swept them. Holy cow, that's incredible. But you were a Jackie Young offensive rebound away from them not even making it out of the first round. As you said, the Hospital Fever, after losing Kelsey Mitchell, still forced overtime and had a chance. I think the finals, for me, at least being in the arena, was a little anticlimactic, because it did feel so different from everything we had seen through the first 2 rounds. And especially for me, covering a 3-game series and then a full 5-game series that went to overtime, it was what is going on? And I think the way that you described it, it was very much like their regular season, right? They started out, they're not doing too hot. They're winning, so it's fine, which you need to win in the postseason, but they're not the team that they were the second half. Then on the flip side of it, you have the Mercury, and Alyssa Thomas came out and said, I think we let up when we reached the finals, which is understandable when you have a team that maybe wasn't expected to get there, that was counted out. And then they get there and they're super stoked, and then they get kind of slapped around a little bit. If they bring the key players to that team back, they certainly have a great foundation to go back to the finals. They know what's coming. They understand all of the hoopla around it, the extra media, the schedules that you should adhere to or adhere kind of closely to when it comes to that. And they will have that experience so that they're not shocked when they get to the finals. And I think that's the biggest thing about the Aces that they've been able to do with their core, with Chelsea and Asia and Jackie. They know exactly how this all goes. It's very structured to them. Doesn't mean they're always going to win, but that's not an issue for them.
Yeah, it was such a fun story. of this team. And, we will put that into, put a little bow on this Aces season. The dynasty is still very much so alive. Like the Nike ad said, back to back, then back again. This Aces team doesn't feel like they are going anywhere. But before we move on to what is, I think, going to be the most intriguing offseason in the history of the WNBA, one more little tidbit on Tibbetts from what we saw in that final game. Nate Tibbetts was ejected in Game 4. Fair or foul, Ice, that we saw a head coach get thrown out in a potential championship game?
Foul. Very foul. The first time that it's ever happened in league history. I am watching it back in real time and I'm watching the replays. I'm not quite sure exactly what has to be said in order for someone to get ejected. I know that making physical touch with a referee is a very big deal and that will warrant you an automatic ejection. That did not happen, right? We didn't see Nate Tibbetts touch the referee. We saw him approach her, yell down. He's obviously a couple inches taller than her, being 6-something, she's 5-something. So it looks bad because he's like over her, towering over her and yelling, but then also proceeds to immediately walk away. I mean, I feel like I've seen other coaches, Cass, yell, curse, point fingers, yell, and stay in someone's face for 20 seconds. The Becky Hammon stare down is a thing for a reason. And I just felt like Nate Tibbetts, emotional, you're coaching in a finals, yells at a ref about something they missed, but yelled and walked away. And I don't know. And I'm saying, unless he says something about her mama, I just don't know how that warrants an ejection.
For what we saw, absolutely foul given the situation. As I said, we've seen so much worse. We've seen so much worse in that arena. Like Diana Taurasi played there for 20 years. We've seen worse.
That's so true.
Literally.
Being in the arena though, and like having it happen because it's the scores table's on our side or like the bench is on our side, and seeing her make that motion, we're all like, is this really happening right now?
Yeah.
Like, that's bad. I think there was an overreaction a little bit. We did do a pool report. I think he said, "Are you effing kidding me?" Obviously using the full word. We're not going to use it. And then he repeated it. But again, like, as I said, we've seen so much worse.
Yeah.
It was soft. In his own words, it was soft. It was soft.
Philosophically, I don't have a problem with a coach getting tossed in a finals game. I don't. If you do something that warrants an ejection, if you do something that warrants a tech, then you get it. It doesn't matter if it's game 1, preseason, or the finals. I just have a problem with that because it didn't warrant an ejection. And it was soft. And look, I think that you are kind of setting a dangerous precedent. Even though refereeing is inconsistent, that's a problem in and of itself. Even though referees, don't think they might be setting a precedent with a certain call here and there, now you have set a precedent, something that has never happened before in this sport. You do have to approach that, I think, incredibly lightly. Did that make a difference in the game, in the series? We can have that conversation all day long. I don't think it did. Like, the Aces were winning the series no matter what. I feel like the Aces were going to win that game no matter what. But, I mean, it was the third quarter. There's a lot of game left.
That's the problem. That was the problem. I was going to say, that was the problem with Carolina, is it was like it was 2 minutes left in the game and it was over.
No.
And obviously, if you're watching the game, they got better after he left, which I think that's just pure sports, right? Your coach gets ejected.
Rally around your coach.
Yeah, you feel like you've been going through adversity. Like, guys, come on, let's pull back and let's get it for him. So that's probably what the conversations were amongst like a player-led team. But at that point, they're down 2 people. They're down the head coach and Satu Sabli. Like, come on. So it was just, for me, it was the time that was left and the overreaction I agree with. And again, just as our game in this league is continuing to get more eyeballs, more viewership. ESPN said that it was the most watched playoffs they've had on their air, WNBA playoffs they've had, which is something to celebrate.
Let's go.
As people are watching, we know they're also critiquing. They're also judging. And so seeing this happen in a potential championship game is just not the greatest look. I agree with what you said. If it was warranted, absolutely. But it didn't seem like it was. And we don't need anything extra to talk about here these days with the W. We got so much with Cathy getting booed. We could talk for days about everything else.
Let's talk about that because let's transition into the offseason, put a bow on the Aces season. Congratulations to the Aces, to Becky Hammon, to Asia Wilson. You're the first ever player to win Defensive Player of the Year, League MVP, Finals MVP, and a scoring title in the NBA or WNBA.
That girl.
I don't think that freaking girl, she's the best player in the world right now. But when she was being presented with the MVP trophy, I mean, Cass, was it as loud in the arena as it was on TV? Because I couldn't even hear Cathy Engelbert and what she was saying into a microphone because the boos were so loud.
No, we couldn't hear anything that she said. It took over everything. I know that I thought it was kind of interesting how many Mercury fans stayed back. And then I started kind of seeing some things that people specifically stayed back to boo the commissioner.
Oh, man, your team's getting their butt whooped. And I mean, like, I'm sure those tickets weren't cheap, so I know you want to get your money's worth. But your team's getting your butt whooped and you stick around just to boo the commissioner? That is solidarity for the growth and the health of the league, if I've ever seen that. And so
The X factor.
Truly. As we look into this offseason, there's kind of two major things that I think we need to take a look at. And one of those things is the current CBA that is now being negotiated. Very clearly, and it's obvious, WNBA fans are not happy with Cathy Engelbert, as we heard at the trophy presentation ceremony. WNBA players, obviously, are not as well. We heard what Napheesa Collier had to say, and then Cathy Engelbert's rebuttal, and then Napheesa Collier canceled that meeting with Cathy Engelbert. She said that the relationship is irreparable, that she does not see her and Cathy Engelbert able to make amends. We now have a very pivotal CBA. From where that stands right now, from your perspective, Cass, from all of the reporting that you've done and the people that you've talked to, where are we at right now with the players in Cathy Engelbert in the current negotiations?
Players aren't happy with the relationship that they have with Cathy Engelbert. That's a thing. No one has been quiet about that. That's very separate, though, from negotiations. I think it's very important to point out before we even get into all of it is that Cathy is not the end-all be-all to negotiations. Collier is not the end-all be-all to player side of negotiations. There's a CBA committee. It is led by Nneka Ogwumike and Satu Sabali as co-chairs. Obviously, they speak with players. There are ways to disseminate information down through teams. This has always been the case. On the league side, you have Cathy Engelbert, who reports to the WNBA Board of Governors. Those are all of the team owners. The ownership layout is kind of tricky, but when we're talking about a CBA, they also have a CBA committee for the owners. And very important here, team owners are the ones setting what they want, what they're okay with, what they believe in. Ideally, they're all discussing together. I can tell you that after Mark Davis answered a few questions at the presser that was disseminated widely, we tried to speak to him privately, and he said that it was not the time to talk about CBA. On the one hand, I totally understand that. Your team just won a championship. Enjoy that. Let it go for a night. On the other hand, we haven't heard from any owners, and it's not always easy to speak to owners. So I do just want to lay out when we talk about the CBA booing Cathy Engelbert and the relationship they have with Cathy Engelbert, certainly notable. But there are team owners who are arguing for what they want as the league goes forward.
I think that's important to point out and to differentiate that these two things can coexist, can happen at the same time. And the latest that we have heard in the current CBA negotiations cast based off of your reporting and conversations that you have had behind the scenes, the latest report is that in the latest proposal in the updated CBA is a veteran minimum of $300,000 and a supermax at $850,000. Now, I want to get both of your perspectives on this, but Nneka Ogwumike, of course, who is the head of the WNBPA, has said, look, yes, those numbers on paper, they're a massive increase, right? It's a massive leap. But respective to the amount of money that is now coming in to the WNBA with the new TV contract, it's the same percentage. It's the same revenue share. So from the players' perspective, they are pushing for a larger share of the pie. The NBA Supermax contract is 35% of the salary cap, while the number is more. The percentage share is not. And that has been a huge sticking point for the players and the Players Association is percentage and revenue share and a fluid revenue share versus a set in stone number. So as when you hear that the proposed numbers, the pushback from NECA and the entire Players Association, your initial reaction?
Yeah, it comes across that if the percentage isn't growing and changing, then the owners, the league is not acknowledging that the players are directly contributing to the growth of the league, right? If you are a part of this league and you are bringing in X fans, you are bringing in X viewers, you are bringing in more X merchandise, right? You have to receive portions of that. Like that is fair. And so for me, it's frustrating to hear that, especially at this point. The last CBA negotiation, we talked about charter flights being a big deal and maternity leave being a big deal. And it was more so about the lifestyle of players, acknowledging that they were professionals. Like now it is time to pay them. Now we have seen the numbers consistently grow. We've seen the numbers consistently rise on multiple fronts. Now it is time to make sure that that percentage of rev share goes up, that they are making a percentage of the basketball income that is being brought into the league. I agree with, I saw that comment from Satu Sabli saying it's almost as if we're not part of the growth of the league is what this proposal is making us feel like. And it just in the current age of where we are in 2025, that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable.
Yeah, Cass, just from conversations that you may have had, now where are we at with those numbers? With that most recent proposal, what comes next?
Players are still, as I detailed, focused on a percentage of the revenue and not so much what a number is. The other aspect is in the WNBA, these salaries have always been done per year through the extension of a CBA. So the last CBA, if it had gone its length, was I think like 8 years. In the first year, the Supermax was 200. The next year, it's 210, like what have you. Players want that to fluctuate with revenue that's coming in. The other thing is a lot of players have said, especially there's other things tied to this CBA, right? Charter flights need to be codified, more pregnancy protections or family protections, things like prioritization, which was a huge issue for owners in the last one. There are players who do like to go overseas, and there are players who would prefer to stay home. A lot of those players I spoke with, for example, Dana Evans, Satu Sabali, Kalani Brown, Kalani Brown and Dana Evans have called themselves tweeners. So we talked last week about you are not on a rookie contract anymore, but you're not making a veteran maximum. You're going overseas to play. You're just in a different situation. One thing that was also pointed out to me is when you were in college, you did not make NIL money, these tweener players. You missed that opportunity. So you're just looking to make the most money you can. When it comes to something like prioritization, some of them said, this is not everyone, a number in the million range would be a better number for a top player, especially as that whittles down to consider staying home full time. And as we've seen, there are facilities now open, for these players to use. Like this is becoming a year-round business. So for players, I think that 1 million mark is pretty notable.
Yeah, the interesting thing about numbers is one, we can estimate as to what they should be, but there's not necessarily enough transparency with the league of what the numbers are overall, right? For example, we don't know what Cathy Engelbert makes as salary, right? We have no idea. We can't research that information and can't find that. Lack of transparency. Whether a player gets the max or is a rookie contract in the in-between. Understanding that, hey, if they bring in or a number 1 draft pick, top 10 draft pick, bringing in notable numbers, obviously right off the bat, creating a compensation for that. But like the numbers are there, guys. I thought the Aces was the best example of seeing a team that was purchased in 2021 for $2 million and is now valued at $310 million. The New York Liberty were between $10 million and $14 million. A year later, they're estimated to be $450 million. Like the money is there. We're seeing it be there. And these are obviously two franchises that have experienced success in this league. That's another thing that I think we have to talk about a bit more is some of the teams and franchises that have been hurting the most for money have just not been successful in the past few years. And so you're starting to see this lopsidedness between the Aces being valued for 310 and then maybe the Dallas Wings being valued for 100 million. Or something even lower than that. And so also those staggering numbers make it very hard, I feel like, to negotiate for everyone to make a number that is within the median, right? That fits and fills both voids. Whether you're signing a rookie contract and you play 6 games, whether you're A'ja Wilson, you're playing every single game and you have the max contract. But we don't really know how much the league is making. We don't know how much the league is in debt. And so then you don't know whether 850K or $1 million sounds right or wrong because you don't really know what to compare it to. And we don't necessarily know where all this money is coming from. Have we paid off the debt that previously existed in this league from the 27 years that maybe people weren't paying as much attention and it was fighting through growth? The NBA went through the same thing. So this turning point is important. But to me also, this is where I hope in the next negotiations after this, that more transparency is given to the league about the money that is going into it, the money that is coming out. So now we know how we can hold owners to be accountable and paying players what they're deserved. Right now, we don't really know that.
We have no idea also, right. We have no idea of any of the money going on. We have no idea from an owner perspective, as I said, the debt, but also how much they are paying now to properly support their players, right? We've seen things like practice facilities go up. Those don't go up with a $0 amount. Like those are expensive. We talk about charter flights. It was 2 years ago, 3 years ago that Cathy Engelbert was saying, listen, like I want players to fly the way they should, but we don't have the money to do it. And it's not the teams paying that money right now. It's the league. And so if that's codified, one of the questions is, okay, well, is the league still going to pay $30 million a year to fly you charter? Because that's an investment that the league is making, that the league needs money for. Like there's so much going into these negotiations when it comes to money. I do wish we knew more about the money because all we're getting right now is salaries. And I will say that the salary numbers that came out last week when Satu told me the vet minimum, it was a little bit of a slip on her part. Everyone has been very confident about not wanting to talk numbers because I think when you put a number out there, for example, these fans who have been very supportive, like, listen, to me, the way I grew up, $300,000 is a whole hell of a lot of money. And there are fans who are going to view it that way. And when you don't know, like, all of the other monies that we're talking about, it is really hard to Ice's very well put point to, like, put all of this into perspective.
$300,000 is a lot of money. How much, to me, $300,000 is a lot of money when you compare it to, maybe what you think players might be making, like what we know that Caitlin Clark makes in the range of $70,000. You would say, well, yeah, $300,000 is a lot of money compared to that.
Also in a 5-6 month time span, right? Keep that in mind that, you're making this amount in half a year. The other half of the year, either you're figuring it out, you're rationing out your money, or hopefully like some of these athletes have been doing, which is the other side in which the WNBA, I think, has done a better job this year in branding. Right? The more shoe deals that are going, all the brands I feel like are in. We've got Nike, Puma, Reebok, Jordan, obviously, and multiple players having multiple shoes and sneakers and merchandise. So I think like on one breath, that players are making more overall because of some of these outside forces and brands that are now pouring more money into a league, into the most marketable species on the planet, which is women. But on the other side, everyone needs to be guaranteed that when you're playing WNBA. If you want us to take it serious in terms of a professional league in which people don't have to do anything else other than play their sport and do their job and be able to support their family and themselves, we have to up the salary. Like, it's as simple as that. The interesting thing is we have these numbers that exist now and we act like, they have to go up. They also could not. Like, what if transparency happens and then we find out that the league is more in debt than anybody thought? And then it's like, yeah, we can't even afford to pay you $850. we actually need to go to this. You know what I'm saying? Or 850 comes with a in your third year of whatever contract, right? So it's just interesting that it can go either way.
And to your point about the endorsement deals and the outside money, that's not like I don't that's not the players' problem that they make money outside of the WNBA. Like I don't think that should be a bargaining chip for the W to say, okay, well, but look at all this other money that you're making. Patrick Mahomes is on every single commercial that I see every time I sit down to watch an NFL game, but that doesn't stop the Kansas City Chiefs from paying him $45 million a year. Like these extra deals, like that is separate because you are a businesswoman. You are marketing yourself, that you are capitalizing on the brand that you have built. That is not reason for the W to say, okay, we'll pull back just a little bit because like you're going to be fine. Don't pocket watch. They're making this money independent of the WNBA, even if it's because of the platform the W gives them. That is not a reason for the W to pull back. So yeah, I think that it is a very strategic move that the W is very inconspicuous about actual numbers and dollar amount that they put out there. But I think that adds to the importance of percentages because yeah, like I said, $300,000. That sounds like a lot of money to me. $850, man, I would love to make that in a single year. But relative to the value that they pose to the league, is it fair compared to every other league out there, compared to the NBA? All these players are asking for is fairness relative to their male counterparts. So I know that's going to be a massive conversation. The CBA is up on October 31st. Spooky season. Clock is ticking there. But another reason why this offseason is so interesting and pivotal and wild and different is because of the number of free agents that we're going to have this upcoming offseason. Peek behind the curtain before we hopped on to record, Cass and I were talking. I was like, Cass, is this player under contract? And Cass was like, nobody's under contract. Like, no way. But obviously that's not the case, but it's pretty close it. Like, if you're not on a rookie deal, you're probably a free agent. So, Cass, break this down for me. Why are we in this position right now? And what kind of silly season could potentially be in store with just the sheer number of players that are free agents?
Over the last couple of years, knowing that the players were going to opt out, they had seen the business growing for a while now. Everyone knew that the CBA, they were going to opt out early and negotiate a new one. Players did not sign contracts past 2025. And that's so that whatever comes in the new CBA, and we talk mostly about money, but there are other things too, that they can take advantage of that instead of being tied into, old numbers, for example. And so anyone who could, which is most players, are not signed beyond this year. There are a lot of players who are going to stick with their teams. But certainly, like when you open it up like this, when everyone's a free agent, I think about it in terms of, seems weird, but like the super team era of a couple years ago where New York went and they got a whole bunch of top players and made a super team. You could totally do that now if you're almost anyone. You could pick and choose. Like Unrivaled last year, you saw a lot of players talking with each other. And there was speculation, like, oh, would you want to come play with us? Brittany Griner announces where she's going with her new teammates. I think you're going to see a lot of that this year once the CBA is done. Because, it's enticing to think about going somewhere else versus just staying where you are, especially if you could almost decide the 4 you're going to play alongside.
And there are some teams that desperately need help, that desperately need bigger names, bigger players to fill a roster, maybe around some of these younger superstars. Immediately what comes to mind is, putting maybe some more veteran leadership and another superstar next to Kiki Iriafen and Sonia Citron in Washington. Another, obviously, Paige Beckers. Maybe Arike Gumbawale stays, maybe she doesn't. But putting another or two or three, trying to get superstars around some of these young players that we have that we know are going to be faces of a franchise. So I think it's interesting. And two, as a competitor, this is what makes the league at this point too, like so pivotal for me, is seeing that people now have a little bit more autonomy over what contracts they are getting and where they want to be. Whether it's, hey, I'm just picking my best basketball friend and we're going to go rock and win a championship, or whether it's, I want to relocate my family to a city that fits our needs better. Like whatever it is for these women, both now, I feel like both opportunities exist because of where the league has grown to. And that's what you want. You want players to have autonomy over their job because, again, this is their livelihood.
Which also could create parity in the league, which makes for a really fun product. As fun as it has been to watch dominance in Vegas over the last 4 years plus,
Literally.
like parity in this league is fun.
Yes. And I was just thinking too, like, especially with the 2 expansion franchises that we have, my thoughts are like, what superstars are, or what good players that could be superstars are going to branch out and maybe leave a team in which they've been the 3rd or 4th option, or they came off the bench and made a difference and decide that they want to be the main option in Toronto, in Portland. Like, there are a couple of names that come to mind right away, and maybe I'll drop those later on another pod, of a couple of players who I feel like
Stay tuned.
want to get under the spotlight of the superstar and eventually make themselves a superstar. We saw somebody like Kelsey Plum, who has won championships, do that. That's 100% what she did with LA. She went there because she wanted to be the person on the team. It's nothing wrong with that. Go be the go-to person and then prove that you can be that. But I also think there are a couple of names of players that are really getting good in this league that want to be the go-to person. I'm interested to see if they also can solidify maybe a supermax contract and being that with a new franchise.
Yeah, and to that point that Ice made about, like, there's nothing wrong with that, I think we have to remind ourselves of that as well, that if a player wants to go somewhere to make the most money, okay. If a player wants to go somewhere to win a ring, okay. If a player wants to go somewhere to be with their significant other or to be closer to home or whatever it might be, like, that's fine. I will never fault a player for going somewhere because it is better for their prerogative and their bottom line, whatever that prerogative or bottom line might be.
One thing, though, on, free agency, like, one thing I will be looking at is the last time we had a new CBA when salaries also went up. Salaries went up. I think the Supermax went up like 80%. It almost doubled. But the salary cap only went up 30%. So what happened in that situation was a lot of those mid-tier players were squeezed out. Players like Sydney Colson have talked about this. A few players this week who were asked about it, because it was cheaper to keep a rookie than it was to sign, one of those veterans who maybe made kind of in the middle. So going into this one, I think the big question we need to think about before we even talk about where players are going and who can build a super team is, if the max salary is going up, 4 times as much to $850,000, what is the salary cap? Because if the salary cap is not going up in an equitable amount to even what it has before, right, like another 30% growth, that will also greatly impact what players a team can sign. And on top of that, are there going to still be players who are willing to take less? A player like Stewie, I believe, has taken less. The Aces have continuously signed for less than they could elsewhere to go to a place or stay in a place to win a championship with other players they want to win with.
Yep. And if that cap doesn't expand, right, then you also end up with a team that could have 12 roster spots, but they're only carrying 10 because they can't afford to keep the entire roster full, which is what we've been dealing with in the league year after year after year. So I'm also thinking that after this next CBA and we get money and everything goes great, that's the next thing that's going to expand about this league is more roster spots and being able to pay 15 players a salary that is supportive, again, of a lifestyle in America.
And also, that opens so many doors, too, because we talk so much about injuries in the league this year. Well, a big part of injuries in the league could be attributed to the fact that the rosters just aren't big enough. And if you're constantly on the road and you make these cross-country road trips, which, again, is part of the sport, and I'm sure everybody's playing the world's tiniest violin for people who get to play sports professionally, myself included, it is still exhaustion, a level of exhaustion physically, mentally, emotionally, all of the above, that when you have more players available, then that leads to, allowing players to be able to rest and not have to maybe rush back from injury, maybe not have to force their bodies on some of these long road trips. That's what we see in the NBA. And we all roll our eyes at quote unquote load management, but sometimes it's a necessary thing throughout the span of the entirety of a season. We also have several coaching vacancies in the WNBA. Chris Coklanes was fired in Dallas. The New York Liberty did not renew Sandy Brondello's contract. 1 year removed from a championship. Seattle Storm also did not renew Noelle Quinn's contract, so we have those openings. And we also, of course, have the openings of the Portland Fire and the Toronto Tempo, the two new expansion teams that are entering the WNBA this season. Cass, I know you have a thought on one of those openings. Sorry, excuse me, Ice, I know you have a thought on one of those openings.
Oh, no, I do?
Surprise,
yes,
we do.
Cass, right. Put her on the spot. Yes, my hot take is that timing-wise, I believe Dallas fired their head coach in order to pick up Sandy Brondello. I just believe that that is what happened. I believe that in the timing of it, it was announced through a post that Dallas and Chicago were not going to fire their head coaches, both in their first year. Both did not have great seasons, but experienced some challenges, some youth, some injuries, etc. And so you could understand maybe them not firing them in their first year. And then day or so later, New York announces that they're not renewing Sandy Brondello's contract, a coach that won a championship for them last year that has built, again, a super team. And so then a day later after that, Dallas is like, oh, no, we're getting rid of our coach. And Chris Kokonis is fired. And so my immediate thought was, why not bring Sandy Brondello to Dallas, a franchise that has been struggling over the past few years with the coaches that they have? Why not bring Sandy to Dallas? We know that Sandy Brondello has worked with some of the best players in this league, won championships with the Diana Taurasi in Phoenix, also obviously Brianna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, and company in New York. Why wouldn't we think that maybe she can build something with Paige in Dallas? Just a thought. I think that's what's going to happen.
I like the idea of coaching stability in Dallas. What a good point. They just need stability, and a player herself is not always going to be that.
It's a great point. And to ask a player, and in this instance, Paige Bueckers, to provide stability to an organization, it's kind of unfair. Like, in order for her to provide stability for you, you also have to give her stability. I will always believe that organizations fail players before players ever fail organizations. So I'm sure I love that from you guys. I also think Sandy Brondello would be jumping at the bit to have the ability to coach Paige Bueckers. Like you said, she's coached some of the best players in the sport. Paige Bueckers is that next one, is that next young up-and-coming best player in the sport, focal point and, kind of face of the league kind of person. So I think Sandy Brondello, I don't want to, assume that I know what Sandy Brondello's career goals and life goals are, but I know I would love the opportunity to coach Paige Bueckers. So I love that from you, and I think that would be a perfect fit. But, Cass, kind of looking at the rest of these openings, what are some things that you have heard and maybe some trends that you've seen? Because last year we had 7 openings. 5 of those were filled by men. Whether you think that is right or wrong or indifferent or doesn't matter, that's the case and that's what it was. That was the trend last year. What kind of trends are we maybe seeing this year with these head coaching vacancies?
Well, I think there were additional trends last year, too. What we're seeing for the first time in the W is the coaching pool is larger than it's ever been. Jonathan Kolb talked about that in his exit interview after parting ways with Sandy. Becky Hammon talked about that a few times when she was asked during the finals. Other coaches have talked about that. For the first time, WNBA coaching vacancies are paying really, really good money, certainly comparable to what they used to. So we're seeing college coaches who might be interested. One thing Becky Hammon joked quite a few times about was she didn't think the transfer portal sounded like a fun time, which to a lot of people, I don't think it does, right? You have to consistently keep recruiting those players. Whereas in the WNBA, even though you have free agency, these players, except for this year, are signed on contracts that are maybe 2 or 3 years, right? Then also you have NBA assistants who are interested in head coaching jobs and maybe see the WNBA in a different light than they've ever seen before. You also have GMs in this league who have ties to the NBA. And so friends hire friends. That's kind of how it always works. Or you hire people or you ask out, about someone. So I think there are going to be some surprises, maybe good or bad, in these coaching vacancies. You'll probably see, Ice and I talked about this a couple weeks ago, a lot of NBA influence. You'll also potentially see some college coaches maybe that you didn't expect to leave. Lynn Roberts was that last year, as well as Carl Smusko in Atlanta.
Yeah. And Carl, to your point, did a great job, right? I mean,
Mhm.
Atlanta won the most wins they've ever had in franchise history. That was without the 4 additional games that were added to this season. And so the proof is in the pudding too. That was a coach that had been and had success for over 25 plus years in women's college basketball, sustained success, that was ready for the next level. I think there are a number of coaches in college that could be ready for that. And then we keep saying this, and I'm going to say it till it's like blue in the face, but hire former players. There are several former players that are assistant coaches in the W that I think need to get a nod to make sure that we are keeping former players in our game. Chrissy Tolliver immediately comes to mind right away as someone that I think is ready for a head coaching opportunity, not because of the Nate Tibbetts ejection and that she had to take over, but because she has consistently been a voice in this league as a player and then as a coach as well, and has had some NBA experience. So you know that there's a wealth of knowledge there.
That pipeline specifically, the WNBA has been working on too. A couple of years ago, they instituted a rule that you could have, I think it was at the time, a third assistant coach if one of your coaches, or you maybe, but if one of your coaches was a former player. And that pipeline has been in the works. They have been working on it. I think to your point, it will be interesting to see how many of these hires this year are former players, because that's something that was important to the league as recently as 2 or 3 years ago. And now we're seeing this influx of other coaches get these jobs.
Yeah, I do want to highlight too that as much as we focus maybe on these expansion teams and the head coaching roles, it is also important what the front office looks like. If we know anything from Chicago, Dallas, a couple other franchises, the front office is so important.
And then
I
on
love
the
this
other side, Golden State.
Gold, or hey, there you go. Give a pause. Thank you, Caroline. Bring the
Glass half full.
positive to that.
Glass half full.
Because I need thank you. The aces, right? Nikki Vargas. Like, there are plenty of examples of when you are intentional about who you put in the front office, results will yield, the support will yield. And so I like the hire by the Portland Fire. They hired Ashley Battle as their vice president of basketball operations, strategy, and innovation. I believe all of that is equally as important to what she's doing for them. But Ashley Battle played at UConn. She played in the WNBA for 5 years. She's been a voice in calling games for the Connecticut Sun. But again, a former player who has had some experience with the Boston Celtics in the NBA side, and then now is transitioning to the W in this role. I just believe will help connect the bridge between what players want, what the front office wants, and making sure that these things are a cycle that's moving in the positive direction. So I like this hire, and I hope that this is a trend in our league, that we kind of find more players that have experience in business and strategy in these things, and then bringing them into these front office roles.
And yeah, Cass, to your point about NIL and transfer portal, like a college coach's job has never been harder than it is right now, because you are coach, you are developer, you're recruiter, you're general manager, you're a champion for your program, which is what you have always done. But now you're trying to get millions of dollars from boosters and investors, and the athletic department now in a revenue share world, that coaches are now having to fight for their fair share of revenue, especially in the women's game. So being a college coach is difficult. And in the past, it was significantly more lucrative than it was being a coach in the W. I actually talked to a college coach, current college coach, that said they got offers to coach several different W teams. But at that point, they said, look, I'm making so much money in college. Why would I go to the W? That is changing. That gap is now shrinking. That if you are a WNBA coach, you can make a comparable salary to what college coaches are making and not have to deal with all the bullcrap that college coaches are dealing with right now. So it is interesting to see kind of a trickle up effect in women's basketball, men's basketball, and football, and college sports in general. A lot of coaches are like, I don't. It's not worth it anymore to be a head coach. I'll either be an assistant or go to the next level where I don't have to deal with 18 to 22-year-old millionaires. Some coaches are great at it. Some coaches I can understand maybe wanting to take a different role and kind of pivot at this point in their career. But speaking of college, we have the AP preseason top 25. Just a reminder to everybody listening there, We're going to hit the W year round. We'll hit Unrivaled. We also will hit college basketball. This is your one-stop shop for all things women's basketball, period, college and professional. We have the AP preseason top 25, and at the top of the list, we have UConn. I don't think that should come as a shock to anyone. The reigning national champions. They bring back AZ Fudd. They bring back Sarah Strong. I never want to say no Paige, no problem, but they at least are bringing back a big portion of the foundation of that championship team. At number 2, we have South Carolina. Chloe Kitts out for the year with an ACL tear. They lose Mylasia Fulwiley to the transfer portal, but they bring in Tania Latson from Florida State, leading scorer in college basketball last year. Then UCLA and Texas and LSU round out the top 5. I don't think that it's a coincidence that our 4 teams in the Final Four last season are in your top 4 of the AP Top 25. But Cass, I'll start with you. Anything that you vehemently agree with, vehemently disagree with, any surprises, just your overall takeaways from what we've seen from the top 25?
Preseason polls are so hard now because there's so much, as you mentioned, so much change in the transfer portal. It's very hard to put that into context. In terms of the top 5, I mean, I didn't have any big problem with any of it. I think you win a championship, you bring key pieces back, you're number 1. That is what it is. South Carolina, it almost doesn't matter who they kind of plug and play into that.
So true.
In Dawn Staley, Ice trusts.
That we do.
I had UCLA a little lower. I think they, lose some pieces there, but it's preseason.
It's preseason. I'm glowing over here because I miss college basketball so much.
I know. I'm ready for
all
it.
the storylines, all the conferences, which conference is going to dominate? You said it, Caroline, but it looks like the SEC so far, just again in preseason and what they return, are going to be one of the top conferences. Couple teams that I would love to highlight. I think Texas is going to be very, very good again. I expect Vic Schaefer, Madison Booker, Rory Harmon to be back in a Final Four. LSU, we talk about Mylasia Fulwiley. I also believe Kate Koval inside was a freshman big that is a transfer from Notre Dame. They did not utilize her enough, the Irish, and so she left and went bigger and better. I believe that she's going to be a big post player that we'll talk about more this season. Tennessee. Tennessee. Cass and I are big on Tennessee. It's not my orange, but it is a orange. But they're 8 in the preseason poll. I love their coach, Kim Caldwell. Had the chance to talk to her at the Sweet 16 and Elite 8s last year and really get to know their team, their style, their identity. But it's their style that makes them so different, that they play really deep. They play 10, maybe 12 players. And last year, she had a ton of buy-in with the players that she had that weren't necessarily her players. So I'm interested to see now, with her being there for going on a second year, who she can bring into the fold and really get to buy in. But they play a fun athletic style. And then I also
They're hockey on hardwood.
Yes, seriously, hockey on hardwood.
Constant subs. It's overwhelming.
Yeah,
but it's fun.
I wouldn't be the play-by-play for those games and be like, and we've got 4 more subs 2 minutes later, and then rattling off names. But certainly hockey on hardwood. And then lastly, I'm going to throw one in there, TCU. I really enjoyed watching TCU's run last year. Now, they have a completely different roster. But one of my favorite guards, Olivia Miles, transferred there. And I just really believe that Olivia Miles is going to be a premier guard in the WNBA. The reason she went to TCU women's basketball is to work on her pick and roll game. And Mark Campbell, the head coach there, specializes in that. I would not be surprised if at the end of this season, TCU is a top 10 team. I don't think they would have gotten the nod early because they lost a ton, but I would not be surprised with the players they brought in, plus Olivia Miles, that they're a top 10 team.
I love that. I love that TCU pick from you. But I think, look, I'm a graduate of a university in the Southeastern Conference. Sure, call me an SEC homer.
Who would have known? I don't
want.
see that big old helmet behind you. I would have known that.
Call me a homer if you want, but the SEC is going to be, yet again for another year, because it was last year too, such a fun conference to watch. They have 8 teams in the top 25. 5 of those are in the top 8. that is wild. South Carolina at 2, Texas at 4, LSU at 5, Oklahoma at 6, Tennessee at 8, and then you have Ole Miss. Coach Yo has that thing humming. I think that might be kind of a sleeping giant at this point in this upcoming season. And we also have Kentucky rounding out the top 25 as well. Another player to keep an eye on. A sleeper player to keep an eye on. This team is represented in the top 25. That's Maggie Dugan at Richmond. Maggie Dugan made a name for herself in the tournament, dropped 57 points in 2 games in the NCAA tournament. Richmond was kind of they were making some noise in the tournament in the postseason. So that's one name I'm going to be keep an eye on this year.
Hell yeah, Caroline. I love that you say that. One, I cover the A-10 so closely, just did media day with them. And so talking to Maggie Dugan, who has aspirations to play at a professional level, thinks that she could play in the WNBA. And I love that an A-10 team, not in a Power 4, not one of these major programs that we see, but is getting respect early in preseason, because what they were able to do last year, they returned Maggie plus company, and their head coach, Aaron Russell, does a terrific job there. Also wouldn't be surprised if this is maybe his last year at Richmond, because somebody else with a little bit more money and a bigger brand is going to go after him. He's a fantastic coach. But I love that you highlighted the A-10. Shout out to them.
Oh, I'm so giddy. I started this pod kind of sad. The W season was over. Now I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. March is just around the corner.
We got new frogs to kiss. Let's go.
New horn frogs to kiss. Let's get it. Okay, that is Ice Young. She is Cassandra Negley. I am Caroline Fenton. We are here every single week on Hoops 360, breaking down everything in women's basketball. So next week we'll come back with what's the latest in the CBA. We'll also take a deep dive into some teams and what their off seasons might look like, what we think their off seasons should look like to either get into the dance or get back into the conversation. You can find Cassandra Negley's breakdowns for all things women's basketball on sports.yahoo.com. She does a fabulous job. She is an insider. She has some of the best reporting in the business, so stay up to date with what Cass has going on over there at sports.yahoo TV. And until then, we'll be back here next week on your preferred podcast platform and the Yahoo Sports YouTube page. It's Hoops 360. On today's episode of Hoops 360, we highlight the Aces winning the 2025 WNBA championship, their third in 4 years. But what will this offseason look like? Not just for the Aces, but the entire W with continuing CBA disagreements and free agency, plus some coaching vacancies across the league. How will these new franchise teams open the door for players and coaches in the W? All that coming up. We'll chat soon.